We've all made mistakes, but some hit a little bit harder than others.
A Manning, a Brady, all these guys that has been the prototypical type of quarterback in our game, they're not gonna do that.
NFL players have always been in the public spotlight, but nowadays, especially with the advent of social media, the court of public opinion has shifted drastically on a guy. How about we take a look back at 10 times NFL players stepped in it and cost themselves millions of fans. Just a quick honorary mention to LeSean McCoy for spoiling Avengers Endgame for a lot of people. That was not cool. That was honestly, like, no, don't do that. Definitely had a lot of fans turn on him after that. People waited a decade for that moment, and he ruined it. Yeah, bad move, LeSean. I think that the most obvious entry on this list is probably what happened with Vick back in 2007, when he went from being universally revered and one of the most popular players in the entire NFL to an outcast, not only from the league, but society really. And of course, I'm referencing his involvement in the bad news kennels, which subsequently led to his arrest, suspension, and even legitimate prison time. For anyone who's living under a rock for the past 15 some odd years, the bad news kennels ended up not actually being a kennel, but rather an illegal dog fighting ring. Now, for anyone out there who wants to find a quick and easy way to lose your friends, try doing something mean to a dog. Not that TPS would ever encourage such behavior, more so just reminding everyone that people love dogs. So the public was pretty ticked off when Vick was implicated in the scandal. So much so, even after he served his prison sentence, there were still protests demanding that he be barred from ever signing another NFL contract. Obviously, this whole ordeal was not a great look for anyone involved, especially Vick, who before the news broke had one of the best-selling jerseys in the entire NFL. Needless to say, he lost quite a few fans. And while some returned after he served his time and revitalized his career with Andy Reid in Philly, there is a sizable chunk of his fan base that never warmed back up to the dual-threat quarterback. It is interesting just how quickly people were to disparage Vick for his actions against dogs, though, because there seems to have been much more of a willingness to forgive another NFL quarterback who lost millions of fans at one point, and his transgressions were actually against another human being. Of course, we're talking about the longtime Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, who had his own tiff with the law back in 2010. And by tiff, I mean Roethlisberger was investigated for a sexual assault that took place in the women's restroom of a Georgia nightclub, while Roethlisberger claimed to not have had contact with the woman. The accuser, then 20-year-old student at a local college, was seen at several places with Roethlisberger leading up to the incident. They even had photographs together. The situation was bad enough that Roethlisberger's camp had to enlist the services of super lawyer Ed Garland. For those of you who don't know Garland by name, all you need to know is that he was the man who had previously defended Ray Lewis after his infamous white suit night. So yeah, needless to say, things were looking pretty sketchy. The charges were eventually dropped, but Ben's image definitely took a hit, and he was suspended by Commissioner Goodell for 6 games without pay. So at least he didn't get out of the incident scot-free. But either way, definitely an ugly situation. On the subject of Ed Garland and Ray Lewis, how about the time Ray Lewis lost a ton of fans? Which time, do you ask? Well, there was the first go-around, when Garland was involved, and Lewis was reported to have been at least peripherally related to a murder that took place after the Super Bowl in 2000, when a fight erupted between the Ravens linebacker, his 2 companions, and a group of other people. The fight resulted in the passing of Jacinth Baker and Richard Lawler, and within the next couple of weeks, both Lewis and his companions, Reginald Oakley and Joseph Sweeting, were questioned and eventually indicted on serious charges. 2 weeks into his trial, Lewis ended up turning on his buddies and cutting a deal with the district attorney, and largely due to the lack of social media back then, and the general lack of accountability most celebrities were held to, the scandal just sort of went away. But there were certainly a number of fans who decided they could do without Lewis anymore. Even Disney was uncomfortable doing business with Lewis. When he won the Super Bowl MVP the following year, Disney opted to have the Ravens quarterback Trent Dilfer shout into the camera that he was going to Disney World instead of Lewis.
What are you going to do next? I'm going to Disney World!
Even though it was tradition to have a Super Bowl MVP utter that phrase. Then there was the second instance in which Lewis lost a number of fans, which he had been lucky enough to keep or gain over the years, thanks to his hypocritical commentary on other NFL players kneeling for the anthem.
You did take a knee when you are allegedly on record as saying that you never would.
Only to quickly flip his stance again with his infamous double knee kneel once the owners had reached a compromise with the players.
So I walked away, JB, and I didn't drop on one knee in order to protest. Boom, I dropped on 2 knees, both knees, so I can simply honor God.
And all this behavior over the years really seemed to conflict with this holier-than-thou preacher shtick that he propagated. So I say this to say the point is, Ray Lewis, great player, probably not so great of a person. While the charges were different, the reaction was was not too similar with what we saw happen with Adrian Peterson, the Minnesota Vikings' former 7th overall pick out of Oklahoma. For years, Peterson was beloved amongst fans around the league for his explosive, powerful, and determined running style. People loved to watch him play, and subsequently they felt like they loved him. The person. Fans conflated who Peterson was on the field with who he was off of it. In 2014, when he was indicted by a Montgomery County, this was a Texas grand jury on reckless injury to a child. The prosecution alleged that the star running back used a tree branch, generally referred to as a switch, to discipline his 4-year-old child. According to Peterson, he didn't realize or think that there was anything wrong with that, because that form of punishment was used on him as a child as well. Peterson ended up pleading no contest to the misdemeanor charge, which resulted in him being put on probation, fined $4,000, and having to partake in 80 hours of community service. Also, his team at the time, the Vikings, ended up deactivating him for 1 game, and the league suspended him for the rest of the season.
Jeez, Peter, you're more excited than Adrian Peterson at an arboretum.
Daddy, what kind of tree is that?
Man, I want to beat you with so many things around here.
While this set back his career a little bit, Peterson did end up finding his way back into the league despite the fact that he admitted in 2018 that he was still using a belt to spank his son as a form of discipline. He explained to Bleacher Report, "I had to discipline my son and spank him the other day with a belt." Peterson said though he employs other techniques as well. Take away electronics, timeouts, even have them do wall squats. "There's different ways I discipline my kids," he explained. "I didn't let that change me." Well, while Adrian seems to take pride in not having let that change him, a good chunk of his fans wish he had. Not every transgression that costs an NFL player some of his fans is quite as serious as some of the instances we just ran through. Sometimes it's something that happens on the field. Like when Tom Brady went from underdog 6th round pick to one of the league's most hated players. For Brady, it was really a 3-part act. Firstly, it didn't help that his team kept dominating on the rest of the league. I mean, pretty easy for other NFL fans to start to hate on the guy when he's torturing their team every season. Then there was the whole Spygate scandal that put an evil sort of twist on the whole Patriots dynasty. And of course, there was Deflategate, which Brady was entirely the face of. And while Deflategate was not a super serious situation, I mean, it really ended up being a whole lot about nothing, but it was certainly something easy to hate Brady over, particularly once the media decided to make a cottage industry out of it and relentlessly report on it day in and day out. Even if it wasn't that bad of a transgression, it was certainly annoying to hear about. At least Brady lost fans, basically for being too good on the field. We've seen a few guys whose off-field behavior limited their performance on the field and subsequently turned their fans against them, like Johnny Manziel, for example, the infamous Johnny Football. There was a time where Manziel was one of the single most popular individuals in the entire country, let alone the football universe. And while I'm sure there were some Browns fans that had their concerns about drafting him in the 1st round in 2014, no one could have predicted that it would blow up in Cleveland's face so badly. The quarterback was jet-setting to and from Vegas, hardly taking football seriously. And every time he stepped on the field, it continually looked worse and worse. Obviously, he didn't have some legitimate substance abuse issues, but I think that Browns fans got sick of the shtick rather quickly. Kind of like what we saw happen with Ricky Williams and his whole drug scandal that cost him the entirety of the 2006 season. And that was after he missed the entire 2004 campaign when he abruptly retired just days before the season. Allegedly because he preferred to indulge in some, well, extracurriculars rather than play football. Which, listen, I get it. The rigid professional football lifestyle is not for everybody. But that doesn't mean that the fans were necessarily thrilled about it. Not by a long shot. They chalked it up largely to diva behavior. Kind of like what we saw happen with Odell Beckham Jr. in New York. And again in Cleveland. Man, does that guy know how to wear out his welcome. Whether it was his all-out assault on the field goal net, or making a scene in the media, or going to war with his quarterback, Odell always seems to find ways to rub the fan the wrong way. And he has lost quite a few in the time since. Cam Newton ran into a similar conundrum after he made his legendary business decision during the Panthers' disappointing Super Bowl matchup with the Denver Broncos. He and the Panthers' offense had sputtered all over the field all night long. Then he made the choice not to dive on a football. And the even worse choice to refer to the instance as a business decision. I would go as far as to suggest that a fair number of Carolina Panthers fans would have sacrificed themselves for Cam after this epic MVP campaign. But after he made those comments and continued to pout during his post-Super Bowl press conference, the fans turned on him just like that. No one would have guessed it at the time. But that night was the beginning of the end for Cam as a star in the NFL. And the fans surely let him know about it. We have Le'Veon Bell, who's holdout in Pittsburgh, where he had been a beloved member member of the Steelers for 6 seasons, easily cost him a ton of supporters. The Steeler faithful loved him, and many of them continued to support him in the initial stages of his holdout. But once days turned into weeks, turned into an entire season, then everyone turned on him, even non-Steelers fans. Nearly this is one of the rare situations where everyone ended up being right. The fans were right to be peeved that their all-pro running back was out of the lineup. Bell was right to try and get as much money as possible while he still could. And the Steelers were right to not give the massive extension that the aging running back was looking for, as his career sort of fell off a cliff shortly after. Not only performance-wise, but also with his popularity among fans. Which other NFL players went from beloved to loathed just like that? Join me in the comment section below. Make sure to follow myself and TPS on social media. We post great content all the time. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, we're on everything. Go subscribe, go follow. If you like this video, give it a like. It takes one click down below, and subscribe to TPS. We post videos every day. Every day's a new video. Of course, thank you so much for watching. I'm Jason Biondo. I'll see you next time.
On my knees.